Hi boys and girls, this is Miss Maddie here for your November Harvest of the Month lesson. And to give you a hint about what we're learning about this month, I have dressed up as our Harvest of the Month. Do you recognize me? I'll give you another hint. I am the same as these fruits that you see right here. If you guessed winter squash, you are correct. We are learning all about winter squash in our November Harvest of the Month lesson. Before we dive into learning all about winter squash and the different parts of the winter squash plant, let's talk about what all Montana Harvest of the Month items have in common. Do you remember from last year what we talked about? What do all Harvest of the Month items have in common? If you're thinking that all Harvest of the Month items are grown or raised in Montana, you're correct. All of the items that we learn about during these Harvest of the Month lessons were either grown here, such as these winter squash, or they were raised here, such as cattle. The second thing that all Montana Harvest of the Month items have in common is that they are all good for our bodies in some way. They either have protein to give us strong muscles, or maybe they have vitamin A to help our eyes and our skin. Maybe they even have vitamin C to block germs. But all of the items that we learn about in these lessons are healthy for our bodies in some way. So let's start talking about winter squash. Now, my friends, I had to take that winter squash costume off. It was getting a little warm in here. But don't worry, we'll keep playing with the squash costume in a little while. Before we do that though, does anybody know why we call winter squash winter squash? I want you to pause the video and work with your classmates or with your adults at home to try to figure out why we call winter squash winter squash. Go ahead and pause now. Okay friends, were you able to come up with an answer? I'll tell you the correct answer. We call winter squash because it can be stored in a cool, dry place like a cellar or a basement all winter long. And you can eat it for months and months and months throughout the winter. Now, some of you might have been thinking that winter squash is called winter squash because it grows in the winter, and that is actually not true. These winter squash are harvested in the fall, the same time that we're harvesting pumpkins. And fun fact, pumpkins are a winter squash. And instead of growing in the winter, we store them in the winter, and we can eat them all throughout the winter because of their thick skin. Can you hear that? They've got a really hard outer skin that helps them store all through the winter. So that's why we call them winter squash. Not because they grow in the winter, because we can store them all winter and enjoy them throughout the winter months. Now, my friends, let's talk about why winter squash is healthy for our bodies. Remember, all of the items that we talk about in Harvest of the Month lessons are healthy for our bodies in some way. And winter squash has a few main vitamins and nutrients that are really good for our bodies. The first thing that winter squash has that's really good for our bodies is potassium. Can all of you take your hand and put it over your heart and say that with me? Let's do it together. Potassium. Now friends, I'm holding my hand over my heart while I say potassium to symbolize or to show you what potassium does for our bodies. Potassium is very good for our heart health. It helps keep our hearts pumping. So we love winter squash for all the potassium that there is inside of it. Winter squash also has a lot of vitamin A. Now, vitamin A, you might remember from your lessons last year, is very good for our eyes and our skin. Now, the action that we do to show vitamin A is this one. Ah, ah, ah. Can you all put your hands over your eyes and do it with me? Ah, 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 for vitamin A. And that shows us vitamin A is good for our eye health and to make our skin glow. Now there's one more vitamin that I'm thinking of that winter squash has a ton of. That vitamin is vitamin C. Does anybody remember the action that we do with vitamin C? The action we do with vitamin C is this one, and we say k, 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 because the letter C can make a k sound. Let's all do it together. Can you put your arms up in front of your face and say k, k, k? Nice job. One more time. K, k, k. That action shows us that vitamin C is blocking something from our bodies. Can you guess what vitamin C helps block from our bodies? Let's pause the video and talk to your classmates or your teacher or your adult at home about what vitamin C is blocking from our bodies. Go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, what'd you come up with? What is vitamin C blocking from our bodies? If you're thinking that vitamin C helps block germs from our bodies, that is correct. Vitamin C found in our winter squash is very good for blocking germs, and that is important right now. We're moving into winter when flu season happens and people are getting colds, so you want to eat a lot of vitamin C to block germs. Good job, everyone. Now, my friends, we're going to dive into talking about the parts of a plant, and specifically the parts of a winter squash. Now, this is the winter squash, and this is the fruit of the plant. Can you think of any other fruits? Pause the video now and talk to your classmates and your teacher or your adult at home about another fruit that you can think of. All right, friends, were you able to think of another fruit? I thought of a strawberry, and I also thought of a tomato. Did you know a tomato is a fruit too? Fruits carry the seeds of the plant. So inside of this winter squash, there are a bunch of seeds. You might have seen the seeds inside of a winter squash if you have ever cut a pumpkin open. A pumpkin is also a fruit because it holds those seeds inside. And the fruit is kind of like the suitcase. It makes sure those seeds stay protected until they're ready to come out and be planted in the ground to make more of that plant. In this video, you will see me cutting open a humongous butternut squash. As you can see, that tough skin is a little bit hard to break through with my knife. I'm being very careful so to make sure that I'm not slicing anything but the squash. Now it looks like I'm almost through, and I'm going to try to rip it open here. And there we go. Inside you can see all of the seeds. Now we are going to learn about the life cycle of a winter squash. Now, you probably already know some parts of a plant, and we need to learn about all of the plant parts so that we can learn how winter squash grows. And we're going to do that by singing a little song. Let's do it. Now, friends, using my winter squash costume here, we are going to learn about how a winter squash grows. So I want you to think about this for a minute. What is the first plant part that we need in order to grow a squash plant? Pause the video here and think about the first plant part we need to grow a squash plant. Is it the root, the stem, the leaf? Is it the flower or the fruit, or is it the seed? Which of those do we need to start growing a plant? Pause the video now and talk about it. All right, friends, did you come up with an answer? What plant part do we need to start growing a squash plant? If you said a seed, you are correct. First, we need to plant a squash seed in the ground. So we'll plant this squash seed right there. All right, after we've planted our seed, What do we need to do to it? Will the seed grow all by itself without us helping it? Or does it need us to help it get a few things to start growing? Our seed could probably use some sunlight and some water, some air, and maybe some food from the soil. Now, let's give our seed some sunlight, some water, some air. And what plant part will grow first out of our seed? What will we first start to see growing out of our seed? If you've said root, you're correct. Right here, we've got some roots growing out of our seed. Okay, so we've got the seed planted in the soil, and we've got the roots now coming down. Awesome. Now friends, can you tell me what roots do? Our seed was holding the roots inside of it. And once we gave our seed water and sunlight and air and some food from the soil, it grew roots. Now what are the roots going to do? Take a minute and pause the video. Talk with your classmates and your teacher about what roots do for our plant. Okay friends, did you come up with an answer? If you said that roots help bring water and food and nutrients from the soil into the plant, you are correct. These roots will spread through the soil and collect food, water, and nutrients so our plant can grow. Once we've got some roots in the soil, what is the next plant part we'll probably see? Think about our song, roots, stems. So next, out of this, we will start to see a stem. We've got our seed, we've got our roots, we've got our stem. Okay, this is the stem of our winter squash. Now friends, what is the role of the stem? The stem helps carry water and nutrients up the plant so it can start to grow. So the roots take the water and the nutrients from the soil, and then those travel up our stem to turn into our leaf. Wow! We've got our roots, our stems, our leaves, and these leaves are catching sunlight, turning that sunlight into food for our plant so it can continue to grow. Now that is called photosynthesis. Can you say that with me? Photosynthesis. One more time. Photosynthesis. Our leaf is catching the sunlight, turning the sunlight into food for our plant so it can continue to grow. After we've got our stem and our leaf, what is the next part of the plant that we're going to see? We've got our roots, our stems, our leaves. If you're thinking flower, you're correct. This is our squash blossom. So our squash blossom is actually the part of the plant that the fruit will grow out of. And the squash blossom is amazing for our pollinator friends, our bees and our butterflies, because it's where those insects can get food and where those insects can also collect pollen to spread to other plants. So bees and butterflies are super important. Once this flower is pollinated, once an insect brings some pollen to it, it is able to grow into our fruit. And what is our fruit on this plant? The winter squash. So we've got our roots, our stems, our leaves, our flowers, and then out of our flower grows our fruit, our winter squash. Now this is a big butternut squash. And what's inside of our winter squash? The seeds, right? Remember, our fruit is our suitcase for the seeds. So all of these winter squashes grew out of a flower just like this. And now they are the suitcases for the seeds that are inside of them. So we've got our root, our stems, our leaves, our flowers, our fruits, and inside of our fruits we've got the seeds. And then the cycle can start all over again. Wow, that is a really cool life cycle. Let's sing the plant part song one more time so that I can make sure that we all totally understand about the 6 plant parts. Are you ready? Let's do it. All right, friends. I am so happy that you participated in this winter squash lesson with me. And I want to leave you with a little cooking demonstration that I filmed in my kitchen, all about how to prepare winter squash. I'm hoping that you'll watch this video and then maybe you'll take the recipe home and make it at home with your adults at home. I love to eat winter squash, and there are a lot of ways that you can prepare it to eat. I really love to make soup out of winter squash, but you can also roast it in the oven and eat it as a side dish with maybe some chicken and vegetables, or you can cut it into cubes and put it into a vegetable stir fry. There are endless possibilities with winter squash. And don't forget, when you're making your winter squash, be sure to save the seeds so that you can roast them and eat them as a snack throughout the day. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed this cooking video, and I'll see you next month for our December harvest of the month. Okay, bye friends.